you UK company with an employee or employees in Ireland, or perhaps you are a UK company or working in HR in the UK and you are starting up some office or some operation in Ireland. If so, then you might be concerned about the difference between Irish employment law and UK employment law. And that is the topic of this video. Okay, the UK employment law situation and the UK legal system and the Irish legal system are similar. They are both common law systems. So the Irish legal system, in fact, originates from the English legal system. Other common law jurisdictions would include Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and India. Common law systems place great reliance on previous decisions handed down in court, and these decisions then set precedents for principles to be applied in later cases with similar circumstances. So Irish employment law and English employment law are strongly comparable, and they essentially both emanate from the contract of employment between the employer and employee and how that bargain is struck, what's in the contract of employment. But in addition to the contract of employment, there's going to be a statutory regime in both jurisdictions, in Ireland and the UK, and this is where the differences really arise, not so much in the contract of employment itself or in the decisions that may have been handed down in relation to contracts down through the centuries, but in the statutory regime that applies in both the UK and in Ireland. So let's take a look at the differences. Minimum wage rates. There are different minimum wage rates in both the UK and in Ireland. The rest break entitlements are going to differ. The Organisation of Working Time Act 1997 is the relevant act for rest breaks and holiday time and the working week and so on in Ireland. In Ireland, a pension is not mandatory, or the provision of a pension. It is, I understand, in the UK. In the UK, there's statutory sick pay. In Ireland, there's no statutory sick pay scheme. The contract of employment may have a sick pay scheme in it. More successful or wealthier companies or employers perhaps do operate sick pay schemes, and the likes of public servants and civil servants and so on will probably have some sort of illness absence scheme in place. But for most employments, there will be no sick pay scheme, and it is not a statutory obligation on the employer in Ireland. The annual leave entitlements then are different in both jurisdictions. In relation to discrimination, in Ireland, the maximum award for a discrimination-based claim, a successful one, is 2 years' salary, whereas in the UK there is no upper limit. Minimum notice then has slight differences too, depending on the length of service of the employee. Redundancy payments, entitlements. In Ireland, these entitlements are calculated on the basis of service alone, whereas in the UK, I understand the age of the employee is considered. One of the big differences, though, between Ireland and the UK in terms of employment law is to do with the very popular claim of unfair dismissal. In Ireland, you only need 12 months service, 1 year, whereas in the UK, you need 2 years. There are also differences in the handling or treatment of taxation in termination payments. In relation to whistleblowing, there's no limit on the potential award for an employee in the UK, whereas in Ireland, the maximum award is 5 years' salary. However, 5 years' salary is still an eye-watering amount of money, so clearly it's sort of a claim you want to avoid as an employer. Settlement agreements then in the UK have statutory recognition, not so in Ireland. Working time, the maximum working week can be opted out of in the UK. There is no opt-out in Ireland. And in Ireland, the maximum working week is 48 hours per week, but this would be averaged over 4 to 6 months. Doing 48 hours or in excess of 48 hours in any 1 week is not a problem, but the average is the relevant calculation to be made. Agency workers then in the UK, the agency worker needs 12 weeks on assignment for the protection of the legislation, whereas in Ireland there is no requirement for service. The agency worker in Ireland has protection from day one in respect of being treated no less favourably than a full-time worker or a worker in the job. In Ireland, in relation to collective bargaining, there's no obligation on the employer to recognise trade unions or to negotiate with them. There is a statutory or a constitutional right, rather, for an employee to be a member of a trade union, but the union does not have to be recognised in the workplace, whereas my understanding is that in the UK, the union can obtain recognition by way of a statutory route. In Ireland, then, there is only two choices for you. You're either an employee or you're a self-employed independent contractor. In the UK, you can be a worker, you can be an employee, or you can be a self-employed contractor. Quite what the difference is in the UK, I'm not 100% because I only deal with Irish law. But in Ireland, at least you have that simplicity of it's either an employee you're dealing with or a self-employed contractor. Injunctions then, the employee in Ireland, when he goes to court, is far more likely to be successful in obtaining an injunction against the employer than if he was going to, or his equivalent counterpart in the UK. And in relation to 2P, that's the transfer of undertakings regulations. In Ireland, the employer probably gets a slightly more favourable deal, as the triggering of 2P regulations in Ireland must involve the transfer of significant tangible or intangible assets or employees, whereas in the UK, my understanding is that 2P will be triggered in almost all situations where there's a transfer of undertaking. In conclusion then, I'd say to you as a potential or as an employer in the UK who may be considering opening up a department or an entity in Ireland, on balance, Ireland is a favourable regime for employees. UK employers may also find higher levels of expectations of employees when it comes to employment rights, entitlements and so forth. I have a huge amount of free information on my website. You'll see the URL there, employmentrightsireland.com. There's a lot of free information there about Irish employment law, and you can get a free booklet which deals with employment law in Ireland. It's called 16 Mistakes That Most Irish Employers Make. So it's a kind of a checklist that you might find useful in downloading. If you go to employmentrightsireland.com, this website here, and just go to the home page or in the sidebar, you'll be able to download the free report 16 Mistakes by filling in your email address. That's my contact details there on the screen. My name is Gorry. I'm a solicitor and I do quite a bit of employment law. Hope you find this video useful. If you do, you might give it a thumbs up down below, and you may be interested in subscribing to my YouTube channel.